Hello, I thought I'd just do a quick tutorial here for those who are wanting to print a pocket-sized instruction manual. As you see here, I already have my all my sheets all printed out. The first one here, of course, I went ahead and did in color. I've done it in black and white, but it tends to do better in color. Of course, it looks so much better. But as you can see on this image here, I used a glossy paper. That way I wouldn't get a whole bunch of saturation when the ink did print it out. So this is actually a photo paper that I used. And then for the regular pages, I went ahead and just did that front and back, of course. When you do print this, I won't be able to give you a whole lot of advice because it just completely depends on your printer. But the best way that I find doing it, I use GIMP. And you can find the link to that if you don't know what it is in the links page on the website. And download that and add all of the images to that and print directly from GIMP. And then, like I said, you're gonna have to print front to back on each one of those. I also am gonna be using a cutting board here, or excuse me, a paper cutter. And then I've also got a special stapler that I like to use for instances like this that allows you to go deeper on a page so that way you don't have to fold it in order to get to the center point. Now the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take each one of our individual sheets, rather than taking the whole group of them like this and trying to fold them like that. I found that if you go ahead and fold each one individually, it actually comes out a lot better. In order to do this, of course, you want to make sure that you're lining up your lines properly here. I usually take one corner and then I look at the other corner and I try to line that up as good as possible, of course. Nothing's ever going to come out perfect when you're doing it by hand like this, but we'll fix that when we get to the cutting part. But you go ahead and make sure you get it folded directly down the center in this case. And then I usually crease each side as well. Get a nice strong crease. And we're going to do that for every single one of the pages, and make sure that when you're doing this that you're going to get them in the proper order when you have it all put together. And then as I go along, I go ahead and stuff each one back into their page just like that. That way they're ready for the next step. Once you have all of the pages folded down the center line, it's always good to kind of take a look at it. Of course, starting with the page, the table of contents, then we look at the next page over here and we see that that's page 2. And then that's page 3. And we want to flip through and make sure they're all in the proper order. If you printed them as I have it instructed on the download, file 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that sort of thing, they'll be in the proper order as long as you print them properly. The next step is getting this part of it folded. Now this is going to be a little bit different. You're not going to line it up like we did just on the last one, but what we're going to do is you can see that line. That one here is actually not a crop line. Of course, we have crop lines here, but the center one, I don't use that as a crop line. I use that as a way to try to line up the fold. Don't worry about the corners, like I said. You want to make sure that these are properly folded on that line. So we're going to fold that, and then we go to the center piece, give it a little fold. That way you have a pretty good idea that your crease is going to be all right when you actually go down the line and fold the rest of it. There's going to be a little bit of an overlap here. That's done on purpose. And this one, of course, you won't be able to crease like you can with the paper, but you want to make sure you get a nice tight fold as much as possible. You are going to lose a little bit of your ink on the edges there if you are using a photo paper, but that's all right. Get a nice strong crease. And then we stuff this inside and we try to tap it down, make sure everything's lined up properly, because now the inside is going to be lined up all right. Now you see there is overlap again right here. Might be hard to pick up on the camera, but you can see it there kind of. That's all right, because we're going to be trimming it down. Our next step after we get that all nice and lined up is we need to staple it. Stapling it is probably one of the hardest parts to do. Again, you don't want to realign these like we were doing before, because you're going to be off a little bit. One of the best things that you can do is either tape the edges on the top and bottom after it's folded. That way everything stays aligned properly, or use some kind of clip. Oftentimes you can use the kind of binder clips that they sell at office supply stores, which is what I normally use, but I don't happen to have them with me right now, so I went ahead and used these chip clips. So anyways, after we have that nice and fastened, now we want to go ahead and make sure this is going to be nice and flat here. Because when we put it into position, and I've got this little stopper that allows me to position it perfectly for each one, but I always test in the center spot first. And that staple looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and go forward with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, again, that's nice and flat. Staple it in 2 spots on the actual booklet, making sure that I'm not covering up any of the spots where we're going to be trimming from. Good, now we can take the clips off. We got a nice clipping. Now, you see on this one, it did still get it off a little bit, which unfortunately does happen from time to time. But now we move on to the cutting. Now with the cutting part, what I like to do first is I like to actually cut the booklet down the center. Since I've got 2 of them here, I'm gonna put this under my bar, and I'm gonna line it down the center here. This part doesn't really matter too much how accurate you are with that cut, but it allows you to get the paper down, or your booklet down, to a much more manageable size. Now this next part, I'm going to turn it sideways since the camera's in my way, so I can line it up as good as possible here. I'm going to use these lines that I have, the crop lines. I'm going to line those up. Actually, let me do this side first. One thing that I forgot to mention, fold it in half first. That way all of your lines, when you finish, will look good. Now, I did lose some of my markings, but that's okay. I just try to eyeball it as good as possible, sometimes opening up the book to look inside. Then I flip it around. Yep, that looks good. I'm going to flip it around so I can actually use this measuring tool down here, so I can line the rest of it up. And I use the other lines that are coming down the board this direction, so that way I can make sure that it's as straight as possible. And there we have it. We have our little instruction book. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, like I said, but it's still quite nice to have a pocket-sized instruction manual that you can bring with you. I'm going to do the same cuts on the other piece that we have from the bottom half. If you only want one of these booklets, all you have to do is, when you're using GIMP, add an extra layer that's going to cover either the top or the bottom images. That way, when you print it off, it's only going to leave you the top or the bottom. That way, you're not wasting any ink. But since I have to print quite a few of these, I went ahead and printed both sets of them. Anyways, that's pretty much it, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. We'll talk to you later on the next update.